السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. طيب. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد. We are back with our weekly fiqh class with the book Akhsar Al-Mukhtasarat by Imam Ibn Balban rahimahullah, and we reached the bab of mujibat al-ghusl. So the mu'allif rahimahullah, he went through bab al-miyah and the types of water, and then he went through certain things to do with wudu and how to make wudu and certain things like that. And now he mentions the mujibat al-ghusl. And mujibat al-ghusl are the things which make ghusl wajib upon a person. So when they say mujibat al-ghusl, we mean the things which make ghusl wajib upon a person. And he says mujibatul ghusli sab'a. He says that the things which make ghusl wajib upon a person is 7 things. So when they mention a number, the fuqaha, it means that it is restricted to that number and it is no more than 7. He says with the first one, he says khurujul mani dafqan, khurujul mani min makhrajihi biladha. The first of the 7 things that make ghusl wajib upon someone is for a person to release semen. And the condition is that he releases it with desire and with satisfaction. And the reason they say that it must be with satisfaction is because there are some people which are ill, and due to illness they might release something without the intention of releasing it. Therefore we don't say that ghusl is wajib upon that person. And they also said that it is the condition, there is a condition which is he must release it with desire and satisfaction, is because the Prophet ﷺ said إِذَا فَضَغْتَ فَاغْتَسِلْ. And the meaning of the word فَضَغْتَ means that if you release your semen but with as if it has made you tired, exhausted you. And that is the type of mani which comes out with ladha, which is with mani. Madhi is different. Madhi is just, it's not the actual semen, it's just what comes out beforehand. And that doesn't make ghusl wajib, that makes wudu wajib. That's something else. Now we're talking about mani. And then he says وَانْتِقَالُهُ. The Hanabila, they say that intiqal al-mani is one of the mujibat al-ghusl, and that is the mufradat of the Hanabila, that no one else said this. What they mean by this is that if the mani moves out of its place, and where is the place of the mani? Oh, obviously. No. Obviously inside the body, where's it going to be? Huh? Mani, where does it come from? Yeah. From the back. Sahih. From the back. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بين الصلب والترائب. بين الصلب is basically the back. So they say that if it has moved from that place and hasn't come out, then they say that ghusl is wajib. So let's say someone, he's about to release and he stopped himself. The Hanabila, they say that ghusl is wajib upon him. And this is, Wallahu alam, is a weak opinion, but what they believe is that they say it has moved from its place. They have ta'leel, a reasoning, which is that they say al-janaba, they say al-ma qad janaba al-mahal. Therefore they say that is janaba. The ma, which is the semen, has moved from its place. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he istankara, he strongly stood against the view that that same mani is going to go back. Imam Ahmad, he doesn't believe that that same mani which has now moved from its place will go back to the initial place. So therefore they say intiqal al-mani, which is the movement of the mani from its original place, is a mujib of al-ghusl. Then he says وتغيب حشفة في فرج أو دبر ولو لبهيمة أو ميت بلا حائل. The third thing that makes ghusl wajib is for a person to penetrate with the tip of his private part whether he penetrates in a place where he is allowed to or not allowed to. That's why he says وَلَوْ فِي دُبُرٍ أَوْ لِبَهِيمَ أَوْ مَيِّتٍ. Now who in his right mind is going to have intercourse with sheep? Maybe a human being. Huh? Yeah, you'd be surprised. But there are the fuqaha, the reason why fuqaha mentioned this is not random, because to cover for the sick people that exist. It happens. There's sick people who he just finds a sheep in front of him and he does what he. So he's saying that the person who has penetrated with the tip of his private part, this person has ghusl has been wajib upon him. Okay, let's say someone penetrated and then he took out and no many came out. Ghusl is wajib, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إذا جلس بين شعبها الأربع ثم جهدها فقد وجب الغسل وإن لم ينزل. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, وإن لم ينزل. Even if he doesn't release anything, ghusl is still wajib upon him. He's coming. He's coming. He says بلا حائل. It's important. Yeah. He says بلا حائل. بلا حائل means what it means is that if there is something which he puts on which prevents him from having satisfaction, then that doesn't make ghusl wajib. Because what we said with the first thing is that for many to come out and to make ghusl wajib, it has to come out with satisfaction. However, condoms doesn't fall under this, because it doesn't prevent satisfaction. It doesn't prevent satisfaction. It's not something which if you put on, it prevents your satisfaction. Then he says, وَإِسْلَامُ كَافِرٍ. This is the fourth thing. A kafir, the moment he takes his shahada, we say to him, ghusl is wajib upon you. Even if he has not done in his lifetime any of the other things which make ghusl wajib. The moment he takes his shahada, we say to him, ghusl has now become wajib upon you. Okay, similar thing, if someone left Islam and re-entered Islam, same for him. He needs to make ghusl the moment he re-enters Islam. And that's because the Prophet ﷺ, one of the, I think Qais ibn Asim, when he accepted Islam, the Prophet ﷺ commanded him to make ghusl. Therefore they said that this is a mujib of ghusl. Islam al-kafir makes ghusl wajib. Then he says وَمَوْت. The fifth thing which makes ghusl wajib is death. However, obviously it's not wajib upon you to take ghusl, but it is wajib for those, the Muslims who know of your death, to wash, to wash the deceased. And that is fard kifaya, meaning that if he is not washed, if the Muslims do not wash him, then the whole community becomes sinful. The whole community becomes sinful until someone washes him. And with al-maut, that's because the Prophet ﷺ, in Arafah, a man fell off his camel, and then he says, اغسلوه بماء وسدر. And when the Prophet ﷺ's daughter died, Ruqayyah, he said, اغسلوها بماء وسدر وكفنوها. So they took from that when the person dies, it is wajib to wash him and for him to take ghusl. However, they made two. Sidr. And then, but they made two exceptions to this. What's the first exception? Someone that dies, we don't wash him. Shaheed. Shaheed, when he dies, he shouldn't be washed. And there are sorry. Disease. Okay, now I'm going to speak about that. The shaheed that they say that you are not allowed to wash is shaheed al-ma'araka. Shaheed al-ma'araka. Right? What does that mean? The Prophet ﷺ, did he not say that the person who drowns is a shaheed? He's a shaheed. Do we wash him, yes or no? Yes, we wash him, because he's not the shaheed of the battlefield. The shaheed that is not washed is the one who dies in the battlefield. What do I mean by this? He dies in the place of fighting. Not someone who, for example, someone is in the battle, and he's been stabbed. And then he died a day later. This person, did he die in the battlefield? No. Is he a shaheed? Yes, Allahu A'lam, he could be a shaheed. However, do we wash him? Yes. Because he is not shaheed al-ma'raka. He's not shaheed al-ma'raka. That's because Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anh, when he was injured in Ghazwat al-Khandaq, he lived a few days after, and the Prophet ﷺ washed him and prayed janazah upon him. So when we say shaheed, we say shaheed al-ma'raka. And the shaheed al-ma'raka, when he dies in the battlefield, between him getting injured and the death, there shouldn't be a long period. So for example, if he lives a few days, or he speaks, or he manages to give a will and everything, that means that he's not shaheed al-ma'raka. That's number one, that they say we don't wash. The second, which the Hanabila only, they say, the Hanabila, another mufradat al-madhab, and when we say mufradat, it means that only the Hanabila have selected this opinion. Another thing they said is al-maqtul dhulman. Al-maqtul dhulman, the one who was killed unjustly. So someone, for example, he was defending his family or whatever, and then he got killed. He's killed unjustly. The Hanabila say that this person should not be washed. Why did they say that? They said qiyasan ala shaheed. Qiyasan, meaning that they made analogy on the shaheed. The Hujjaj, when they die, yes, they are washed. And the example that I mentioned, the evidence, which is that a man died at Arafah. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he says, كنا في عرفة فسقط رجل عن ظهر راحلته فوقصته. Yes, we do the kafan, but you don't cover his face. You don't cover his face because it's as if he's still in ihram. And the muhrim, you shouldn't cover his head or his face. So the muhrim, he is washed and he is shrouded, but his face remains uncovered. And that's because the Prophet ﷺ says, اغسلوه بماء وسدر ولا تحنطوه, يعني do not perfume him, ولا تخمروا رأسه, and do not cover his head. فإنه يبعث يوم القيامة ملبيا, because يوم القيامة he will come doing talbiyah. And that is regarding the muhrim. If he dies, he's washed as normal. But so the two that we said aren't washed is shaheed al-ma'raka, he died in the battlefield, and al-maqtul dhulman. The sixth thing which makes ghusl wajib, he says وحيض ونفاس. The sixth and seventh thing which make ghusl wajib, as he says, is al-hayd. The Prophet ﷺ, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ويسألونك عن المحيض قل هو أذى فاعتزلوا النساء في المحيض ولا تقربوهن حتى يطهرن فإذا تطهرن. So that's the evidence from the Quran that after the blood stops, that they must take ghusl. And that's also because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, اجلسي قدر الأيام التي كنت تحيضين فيها ثم اغتسلي وصلي. And in another riwayah, ثم اغسلي عنك الدم وصلي. Shows that the Prophet ﷺ commanded the woman that is on her cycle that as soon as it finishes, that she must wash herself in the form of ghusl. So it makes it wajib. And also an-nifas. What is nifas? Is the blood that comes out of the woman after she gives birth. After she gives birth. Now, is it possible for a woman to give birth and for there to be no blood after? So some women have no blood. Yes. Some women, they give birth and no blood. Does she have to make ghusl? Does she have to make ghusl? So the mujib, the thing that is making ghusl wajib, is the blood. If there is no blood, then there is no ghusl. طيب, what is wajib upon her? Huh? Wudu. Why is wudu wajib upon her? The wudu is wajib because something has come out of her private part. What do we say? Anything that comes out of the private part breaks the wudu. Whether it is tahir or najis, whether it is usual or unusual. So therefore, the woman that gives birth without blood, wudu is wajib upon her. However, with blood, then she must make ghusl. And there's going to be a whole bab on hayd and nifas. We're not going to go into it too much now. Then he says, wa sunnah. He says, now these are the things which make ghusl wajib. But we have also ghusl, which is sunnah. And the author and the Hanabila in general, they say that there are 16. They say there are 16. And again, I mentioned, whenever they mention a number, it means it's restricted to that number. So they say that there are 16. He mentions 15 of them. He missed one out. But the first, he says, لِجُمُعَةٍ. The first thing which ghusl is a sunnah for is ghusl al-jum'ah. So for him to make ghusl on the day of Jum'ah. Meaning, and the time for this ghusl starts from after Fajr. So when is he allowed to start making ghusl? We say after Fajr onwards. And however much closer to Salat al-Jum'ah, the better. We said sunnah. Sunnah, so it's not wajib. There is a hadith, غُسْلُ الْجُمُعَةِ وَاجِبٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُحْتَلِمٍ. But how did they respond to this hadith? They said that wajib here doesn't mean al-wajib al-shar'i. It doesn't mean wajib as in it is wajib and if you leave it off that you are sinful. But it is wajib to show how important and how recommended it is. So that's what it means. And that's because there's another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, من اغتسل الجمعة يا رب فبها ونعمت ومن لم. And another evidence for this ghusl al-jum'ah is that the Prophet ﷺ says, من حضر منكم الجمعة فليغتسل. Then he says, وعيد. It's better. So what we mean by the later as in before he leaves. The closer to the time he leaves. The closer to the time he leaves. So let's give example. Someone after Fajr he makes ghusl, and then he sleeps, and then he has breakfast, and by now maybe he's sweating again, and he needs probably to make another ghusl. That's the point. The point is that ghusl should be yeah. The second thing he says, wa'idin. The second thing that ghusl is sunnah for is for Salat al-Eid. And the third is Salat al-Kusuf. What's Salat al-Kusuf? The eclipse prayer. So whenever there's an eclipse, where the sun, the sun hides the light of the moon, or the moon hides the light of the sun. One is called Kusuf, one is called Khusuf, or you can call both Kusuf, no issue, yeah. No. As in to attend this, what he means by attending Salat al-Kusuf. So, let's say for example, Jum'ah is not wajib upon a woman. So is it sunnah for her to do ghusl on that day? No. When we say sunnah, as in sunnah for the person who's going to attend Salat al-Jum'ah, Salat al-Eid, Salat al-Kusuf. That's what we mean. Salat al-Kusuf. As in to attend the Salah. No. So you know that Salat al-Kusuf is going to take place. Yeah. Straight after the eclipse. What's طيب? He's saying there's not time to make ghusl. The eclipse. So it's sunnah for you to make ghusl before you start praying. Yes. And nowadays what you're saying is not applicable because days before they tell us that there's going to be a Salat al-Kusuf. Like with the one that we had, a day before they announced that tomorrow, this time is Salat al-Kusuf. Then he says, wastisqa. Another thing is al-istisqa. These four things, why did they mention them? Because the Muslimin, they come together. And you shouldn't be someone who hurts other Muslims around you if you don't smell great or you are sweating or something like that. So that's why ghusl in these four salawat are sunnah. Then he says, وَجُنُونٍ وَإِغْمَاءٍ. Another thing where ghusl is sunnah is if someone becomes insane and then regains sanity. And, or if someone faints and then regains consciousness. That's because the Prophet ﷺ, before he died, he would randomly faint and then wake up again. And that happened to him about 2 or 3 times. For each time that he woke up, he took ghusl. So he would make ghusl, and then from illness, he would faint again. And then he would come back and make ghusl again. And then faint, then make ghusl again. So from this they took that is sunnah to make ghusl after fainting. Then he says, لَا احْتِلَامَ فِيهِمَا. However, if the person in the time where he's fainted, or even asleep, let's say this person in his sleep or in the time that he fainted, he had a wet dream. Then now we say to him that ghusl becomes wajib, it's no longer sunnah. Then he said, وَاسْتِحَاضَةٍ لِكُلِّ صَلَاةٍ. So we have something called hayd and we have something called istihada. And this is a good introduction for when we come to Bab al-Hayd. Al-Hayd is a natural blood that comes out of the woman. Natural. However, istihada, they call it damu fasad. This blood is not natural. And it's a blood which is an illness. It's an illness, meaning something is wrong. So that's why when they define hayd, not miscarriage. It's like, so let's say, quick example because we don't want to go to, let's say a woman usually, she has her cycle for 6 days. And then it goes on for 20 days. Those 14 days is istihada, it's dam fasad, it's not natural. Does that make sense? So that's why when they define hayd, they say damu tabi'ah. And when they define istihada, they say dam fasad. It's dam fasad. Does she still have to pray in that time? Yes. So they're saying that the mustahada, the woman who has now unnatural blood, it is sunnah for her to make ghusl for every salah. That's because Aisha radiallahu anha, she heard that Habiba, that she was constantly in istihada, constantly. It was a constant case with her. فأمرها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم commanded her to make wudu for every salah. As for her, she used to make ghusl for every salah. So they took from that it is sunnah for her to make ghusl for every salah. But what is wajib upon her? Wudu for every salah. Even if she doesn't lose her wudu. It's wajib for her to make wudu for every salah. Then he says, وَإِحْرَامٍ. The 8th thing that is sunnah to make ghusl is when a person enters the state of ihram. When does the person enter the state of ihram? Is it when he wears the white robe? Or when he says, لَبَّيْكَ اللَّهُمَّ عُمْرَةً or لَبَّيْكَ اللَّهُمَّ حَجًّا? Huh? When he makes the niyyah. When he makes the niyyah. Because some people, a lot of people, they confuse wearing the white garment for ihram. Yes, that is called ihram. That's why people get confused. So he puts that on in London and he says, no, I'm in ihram. No, you're not in ihram yet. You're not in ihram. Yes. That's it. When you make the intention, that's when you have now entered the state of ihram. Now, it is sunnah for him, before he enters the state of ihram, to make ghusl. And that's because the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha radiallahu anha, when the Prophet ﷺ was about to enter the state of ihram, she made water ready for him to make ghusl. And then he says, وَدُخُولِ Mecca. Another thing where it's sunnah to make ghusl is the entrance, in your entrance to Mecca. That's because Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, anytime he would enter Mecca, he would make ghusl just before he enters Mecca. And he attributed this to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he done it, but he attributed this action to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's saying the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam done it. Then he says وَحَرَمِهَا. And he says also to enter the haram of Mecca. And when we say haram, we don't mean Masjid al-Haram. We mean the haram as in the boundary in which certain things are prohibited. So we have Mecca, and then you have the haram, and you have Masjid al-Haram. 3 separate things. 3 separate things. Now Mecca is a massive city. Within it, or it depends what side, we have the haram. we have the haram. So when you see, for example, if you go to Masjid Aisha, and it says the end of the haram, from there, that's where the haram begins, from that side. The haram, there are certain rules pertaining to it. You're not allowed to cut a tree, you're not allowed to kill animals, you're not allowed to hunt, so on and so forth. When it comes to the haram, entering the haram, it is also sunnah to make ghusl. Then he says, وَوُقُوفٍ بِعَرَفَةٍ. When a person is about to stand in Yom Arafah, which is the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, it's also sunnah for him to make ghusl. Then he says, وَطَوَافِ زِيَارَةٍ. Tawaf ziyarah is when he makes tawaf. It's the sunnah tawaf before Hajj. So in Hajj we have arkan, we have some things which are pillars, and we have some things which are wajib, which are not pillars but they are an obligation. And then we have some things which are sunan. Of the sunan is tawaf al-qudum, which is tawaf ziyarah, also known as tawaf ziyarah. For him, when he comes to Mecca, for him to do a tawaf. That tawaf is sunnah, and it is also sunnah for him to make ghusl for that tawaf. Then he says, وَوَدَاعٍ. Tawaf al-wada' it is also sunnah for him to make ghusl. And tawaf ziyarah and tawaf al-wada' are different. In Hajj, how many tawafs are there? How many tawafs do we have in Hajj? 3. The first one, tawaf al-qudum. The second, tawaf al-ifada. They call it tawaf al-hajj. Tawaf al-ifada. And the last one, tawaf al-wada'. So you got one of them is sunnah, which is tawaf al-qudum. Tawaf al-ifada is rukn. Tawaf al-wada' is a wajib. Tawaf al-wada' is wajib. And then he says, وَمَبِيتٍ بِمُزْدَلِفَةٍ. Obviously, after you leave Arafah, you're going to go towards Muzdalifah. He's saying it's also sunnah to make ghusl for when you are about to sleep in Muzdalifah. And he also says after that, وَرَمْيِ جِمَارٍ. For every day that you go for throwing the pebbles at the Jamarat, it's also sunnah for one to make ghusl. For the past, from when he says وَإِحْرَامٍ until وَرَمْيِ الْجِمَارٍ, the reason for why they make it sunnah for a person to have ghusl is again because there is a gathering. There is a gathering where you're going to be with Muslimin, and you shouldn't hurt someone with your odor, so on and so forth. Now we said how many aghsal mustahab are there? We said 16. And we said he only mentioned 15. The one that he missed out is after washing the dead body. After washing the dead body, what did we say about it last week? You have to what? You're close. Not wash yourself. What's wajib now if you wash a dead person? Wudu. However, it is sunnah to make ghusl. Because of the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, مَنْ غَسَّلَ مَيِّتًا فَلْيَغْتَسِلْ. مَنْ غَسَّلَ مَيِّتًا فَلْيَغْتَسِلْ. Whoever washes a dead person, then let him make ghusl. And that way we have 16 aghsal, which are all recommended. Then he says, وَتَنْقُضُ الْمَرْأَةُ شَعْرَهَا لِحَيْضٍ وَنِفَاسٍ. As you know, women, they might tie their hair in plaits, or however it is. He's saying that in the ghusl of hayd and nifas, she must untie her hair. She must untie the hair and make sure that all of the hair has been washed. Why does he specify hayd and nifas? Because he's telling you that in janaba, it's not wajib upon her to undo the hair. Why did they say that? Because they said because janaba is something which is going to repeat. As for hayd, it comes once every month. And nifas comes every time that she gives birth. So they said that because janaba could take place more frequently than hayd or nifas, that then she doesn't need to untie her hair. As for the case of hayd and nifas, they say she must untie her hair. And that is also from the mufradat. And then he says, لا جنابة إذا روت أصوله. He's saying that when she is upon janaba, she doesn't have to untie her hair, so long as she makes her skull where the hair is coming out from, she wets that part. And she doesn't have to wash the rest of her hair. Then he says, وَسُنَّ تَوَضُّءٌ بِمُدٍّ وَاغْتِسَالٌ بِصَاعٍ. He says it is sunnah for the person to make wudu with a mud and to do اغتسال, ghusl, with a sa'. What is a mud? A mud, they say, ملء كفي الرجل المعتدل, which is for someone to be able to fill his palms with water. We're not talking about someone who has massive hands, and we're not talking about someone with very, very small hands. We're talking about the usual person, the usual hand. That amount filled with water, it is sunnah to make wudu with that much. And is that possible? Huh? It's possible. Prophet ﷺ, that was his usual. That's how he used to make wudu. It's just getting used to it. That's all. Yeah. And it's going to come. Two types of things. Here I've seen people, they open the tap and he washes, and then he in the time that he's rinsing, and he's doing proper rinsing, mashallah. So he's doing the sunnah when it comes to rinsing, but in the meantime the tap is running. And in that time, if you just close the tap, what do you lose? You don't lose anything. Yeah. Ghusl. You can make 3 ghusl, yeah. Yeah. So people, they need to get themselves used to these things. You need to get used to minimizing the amount of water you use. And if the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade the one who is in a running river to waste water. Leave alone somewhere else where the tap we have a water bill on it. Allah musta'an. Then he says وَاغْتِسَالٌ بِصَاعٍ. A sa' is 5 handfuls, 4 to 5 handfuls. Is that possible as well? Now people, he's in the shower for 10 minutes. How much water does he use? Then he says وَكُرِهَ إِسْرَافٌ. He says that it's makruh for someone to go excessive in his use of water. So for example, like we said, someone is open in the tap and he leaves it open, and he's making wudu. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, يَكُونُ أَقْوَامٌ يَعْتَدُونَ فِي الدُّعَاءِ وَالطُّهُورِ. The Prophet ﷺ says that there will come people who transgress when it comes to their dua, and transgress in matters pertaining to their tahara, wudu and ghusl. Transgressing, it comes in the form of you wasting water, or you using more than you need. Then he says, وَإِنَّ نَوَى. Now he's going to speak about the matters of niyyah. What is it that you intend at the time of ghusl, and what is the result of your intention? He says, وَإِنَّ نَوَى بِالْغُسْلِ رَفْعَ الْحَدَثَيْنِ أو الحدث وأطلق ارتفع. Now a person is upon janaba, hadath akbar. Yes? And he intended, when he made ghusl, that he is raising both of his ahdath, hadath akbar and asghar. This person, is he allowed to pray? Or does he need to make wudu? He's allowed to pray, because he's intended on behalf of hadath al-akbar, which is his ghusl, and the wudu. And they say that al-hadath al-akbar goes in, al-hadath asghar goes into the hadath al-akbar. So it intertwines with it. They combine. Then he says, أو الحدث. He intends that he's going to raise al-hadath in general. The hadath that is upon me, I'm going to raise it. Then also in this case, he's allowed to pray. Let's say someone intended that he's going to make ghusl in order to be able to do something which wudu is a condition of. Does that make sense? Or shall I repeat? For example, he's saying, I'm making ghusl right now so that I'm able to pray. Or he says, I'm making ghusl right now to make tawaf. Does that make sense? Is he allowed to pray straight after? Yes. He's allowed, because his intention is for him to do something which wudu is a condition of. Therefore wudu the wudu counts. However, if he makes ghusl and he intends to do something which ghusl is wajib for and wudu isn't wajib for example, he makes ghusl. We said what are the things that someone upon janab is not allowed to do? Read Quran. So he says, I'm making ghusl so that I can read Quran. So he makes ghusl, he reads his Quran. Is he allowed to pray now? Is wudu a condition when it comes to reading Quran? No. Because now his intention was to do something which ghusl is a condition of, not wudu. Does that make sense? Another intention that he might have is that he makes the intention that only the hadath akbar, that he's only raising hadath al-akbar. He specifies, I'm raising only hadath akbar, not hadath asghar. He specifies. Now this person, is he allowed to pray? No. So we have about 5 or 6 types of niyyah when it comes to al-ghusl. Then he says, وَسُنَّ لِجُنُبٍ. He says, وَسُنَّ لِجُنُبٍ غَسْلُ فَرْجِهِ. When the person is about to make ghusl, it is sunnah for him to start by making wudu and starting by washing his private part. And that's, when it comes to ghusl, we have about 2 or 3 main ahadith that speak about صفة الغسل. The hadith of Maymuna radiallahu anha and the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. Maymuna radiallahu anha, when she described, she said, وضع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وضوء الجنابة فأكفأ بيمينه على شماله ثم غسل كفيه 3 ثم غسل فرجه. So the Prophet ﷺ, what did he start with? He started with the actions of wudu and by washing his private part before commencing with the ghusl. And then he says, وَالْوُضُوء. Now it's sunnah to make wudu. So what he said here, the ibara is a bit tricky. He says, وَالسُنَّ لِجُنُبٍ غَسْلُ فَرْجِهِ وَالْوُضُوء. What he means is, وَالسُنَّ الْوُضُوء لِأَكْلٍ وَشُرْبٍ وَنَوْمٍ. It's sunnah to make wudu for the person who is upon janaba, he's saying. Someone's upon janaba, but he doesn't want to make ghusl, and there's food at the table. They said it's sunnah for him to make wudu. The least is for him to make wudu. That's because the Prophet ﷺ, whenever food is served and he's upon janaba, he would make wudu. And then he says, وَنَوْمٍ. For the person before he sleeps, let's say he's upon janaba, and then he's about to sleep. Instead of him sleeping without making ghusl, we say it is sunnah, the minimum for you to make wudu before sleeping in that state. That's because the Prophet ﷺ was asked by Umar radiallahu anhu, أَيَرْقُدُ أَحَدُنَا وَهُوَ جُنُبٌ. The Prophet ﷺ said, Umar radiallahu anhu asked the Prophet, he said, should one of us sleep upon the state of janaba? The Prophet ﷺ says, نَعَمْ إِذَا تَوَضَّأَ فَلْيَرْقُدْ. He said, yes, if he makes wudu, then let him sleep. Then he says, and obviously they say that it is makruh for him to sleep upon janaba. Why do they say makruh and not haram? Because the Prophet ﷺ has been narrated, and the Nabi ﷺ كان جنوبا فنام ولم يمس ماء. The Prophet ﷺ had once slept before touching any water. And the Prophet ﷺ, sometimes he might do something which is makruh, but maybe in his case it is wajib. For him to show us that it is allowed. Does that make sense? And the ulama, they have a big difference of opinion. Does the Prophet ﷺ do makruhat or not? If you want to research it and bring us next week, summary. Does the Prophet ﷺ do makruhat? The third thing he says, وَمُعَاوَدَةِ وَطْء. The third thing which is sunnah to make wudu is for a person, after he has intercourse with his family, and he wants to go again. It's sunnah for him to go back and make wudu before coming back. The reason for that is the Prophet ﷺ says, فَإِنَّهُ أَنْشَطُ لِلْعَوْدِ. He says, فَإِنَّهُ أَنْشَطُ لِلْعَوْدِ, meaning that it gives him more energy for him when he returns. And what is better than that is for him to make ghusl. That's because the Prophet ﷺ, in one night, he went past his wives. And each time he would come out of one of his wives' house, he would make ghusl before moving on to the next one. Then he says, وَالْغُسْلُ لَهَا أَفْضَلُ, and we mentioned that. Then he says, وَكُرِهَ نَوْمُ جُنُبٍ بِلَا وُضُوء, and we mentioned that. Then he goes into tayammum. He says, يَصِحُ التَّيَمُّمُ بِتُرَابٍ طَهُورٍ مُبَاحٍ لَهُ غُبَارٍ. Tayammum comes from, in the Arabic language, it means al-qasd. They say, التَّيَمُّم هو القصد. For you to seek something. And that's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَيَمَّمُوا الْخَبِيثَ مِنْهُ تُنْفِقُونَ. Yani do not intentionally seek the worst of your wealth to give sadaqah. And in the lugha, it's استعمال تراب طهور على الأعضاء على وجه مخصوص. Then he says, يصح التيمم بتراب. The first condition of tayammum is that it must be done with soil. And the second thing he says, tahur. First, let's start with the first condition. The Hanabila, they say that anything other than turab you're not allowed to make tayammum with. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he says, وَجُعِلَتْ تُرْبَتُهَا لَنَا طَهُورًا. Prophet ﷺ says that the soil of this earth is what has been made for us as a means of tahara. And before I commence, tayammum is one of the exclusive things that has been given to this ummah. And no ummah before has had tayammum. The Prophet ﷺ says, أُعْطِيتُ خَمْسًا لم يعطهن أحد من الأنبياء قبلي. He says, نصرت بالرعب مسيرة شهر. And the second thing says, وَجُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا. He says, the earth has been made for me a masjid and a means of purification. فَأَيُّمَا رَجُلٍ مِّنْ أُمَّتِي أَدْرَكَتْهُ الصَّلَاةِ فَلْيُصَلِّ. And another hadith he says, فَإِذَا أَدْرَكَتْهُ الصَّلَاةِ فَمَعَهُ مَسْجِدُهُ وَطَهُورُهُ. And then he says, طهور. Let's go back to the first lesson we took, which is water. What is al-ma' al-tahur? For those who are here in the first lesson. Al-ma' al-tahur. Let's ask a different question. How many types of water are there? 3. Tahur, tahir, and najis. طيب. Why does he say tahur when it comes to turab? Is there something called turab, tahur, tahir, najis? The answer is yes. Because they said al-badal, which is tayammum. Tayammum is an alternative for wudu with water. They say al-badal lahu hukmul mubdal, has the ruling of that which it is replacing. So they say that the turab, the soil, has to be tahur, meaning that it's not been used by someone else and that it's not been changed by something else. So let's say we have soil that's been mixed with flour. Mix, and it's something else now. Can we make tayammum with that? No, because it's not tahur anymore. It's changed. Similarly, if that soil was used by someone else, can I now use it after him? No. Same with water. Same with water. Then he says mubah. Mubah meaning that it's not been stolen. And you didn't get a bag, fill it up with soil from someone else's land, and say, you know what, this is in case I need to make tayammum. Then he says, lahu ghubar. This soil that you're going to make tayammum with must have dust. And they say lahu ghubar, and they also say ya'laq bil yad, something which when you hit your hand on the floor, it sticks to the hand. Why is that? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا فَامْسَحُوا بِوُجُوهِكُمْ وَأَيْدِيكُمْ مِنْهُ. Now, if there is nothing on my hand after I hit the floor, there's nothing. It's just the same as before. Have you made tayammum from that turab? You've not. It's as if you've not. Nothing is in your hand. And that they took it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement when he said minhu. As in, you need to make tayammum from the soil itself. So the soil must be on your hand. Then he says, إذا عدم الماء لحبس أو غيره أو خيف باستعماله أو طلبه ضرر بدن أو مال أو غيرهما. We have two things. We have something called which is عدم الماء حقيقة and عدم الماء حكما. عدم الماء حقيقة means that you actually, in reality, you don't have any water. So, salah time has come and you're in the middle of nowhere and there's no water. All you have is soil. This person is allowed to make tayammum. And then we have al-adim lil-ma'i hukman. Hukman meaning that he has water, but at the same time it's as if he doesn't have water. What does that mean? Go on. For example, he might need it to drink. He's thirsty, and if he uses it for wudu, it's finished and he's going to die from thirst. That's an example. Another thing is that if there is water, let's say Faisal is shopkeeper, and he's got plenty of water. And I told him, Faisal, I'm in need. Let me buy this water off you. How much does water cost in the shop? Average. £1. £1, £1.50. And he said to me, this water bottle, £10. And I say to him, £10, that's way more than the average price of water. Is it wajib upon me to buy the water for £10? No, I make tayammum. Or he says to me, £1.50, which is normal price, but me, I genuinely, in my pocket, I don't have anything. I have only 50p. In this case, do I need to go and ask for £1 or can I make tayammum? Also can make tayammum. Another example is that I'm injured and me using water is going to harm me. Then in this case, tayammum is allowed. Or I'm ill, or it's cold. If I use the water, I'm going to harm myself. All these types are types of عدم الماء حكما, meaning there is water there, but it's as if it's not there, because you can't use it. Then he says, وَيُفْعَلُ عَنْ كُلِّ مَا يُفْعَلُ بِالْمَاءِ سِوَى نَجَاسَةٍ عَلَى غَيْرِ بَدَنٍ. Meaning that turab, which is soil, is an alternative for everything that water does. And what he means here is, obviously this, what he says here is from the mufradat, which means he's saying that if you don't have water and you have najasa on your hand or your arm, then he says you use tayammum as a means to remove the najasa. So what they say is that, for example, there's najasa on the arm. He say you dry it and you remove it as much as you can, and then you make tayammum for it. And that tayammum will lighten the najasa. And that is, I remember one of my teachers told me to make a research on this topic and to look into the differences of opinion in this. So when I went to research, I went to Ibn Qudama's book, Al-Mughni. He speaks about it because he's from the Hanabila himself. So he speaks about it. In the other books, there's no mention of it. And that's to show you that maybe it's a very weak opinion that you can make tayammum for a najasa. You look in the books of Hanafi, there's no mention of the mas'ala aslan. To begin with, it's not mentioned. You go to the Maliki's book, it's not mentioned to begin with. Then he says, وَيُفْعَلُ عَنْ then he says, إِذَا دَخَلَ وَقْتُ فَرْضٍ وَأُبِيحَ غَيْرُهُ. When am I allowed to make tayammum? He says, you're allowed to make tayammum when the time of the salah that you want to pray enters. So let's say we have salat al-isha coming in. We have salat al-fajr coming in. He's saying you can't make tayammum for that salah until the time of the salah enters. Why did they say that? Because they said that when is it that you can actually claim that you didn't find water? When the time of the salah is entered. Because when the time of salah entered, you might find water. But if you're before the salah enters and you said, I can't find water, we say to you, wait till the salah comes in. So that's why they said, when the time of salah comes in, then you are allowed to make tayammum. And that is based on that tayammum isn't actually something which raises your hadith. It's just something which allows you to pray. So it's not rafi' lil hadith, it's just mubihun lis salah. Does that make sense? So you're not actually upon tahara. It's just allowing you to pray. That's it. He says وَأُبِيحَ غَيْرُهُ, meaning النافلة, meaning when waqt al-nahi comes out, the times which are times of prohibition, and the time of nafila comes in, like salat al-duha, then you can make tayammum for that salah when the time of it comes in. Then he says وَإِن وَجَدَ مَاءً لَا يَكْفِي طَهَارَتَهُ اسْتَعْمَلَهُ ثُمَّ تَيَمَّمْ. Let's say this water, I have this much water. Is that going to be enough for the average person to make wudu? No, it's not going to be enough. So he says, I'm going to make tayammum. We say to him, no. We say to him, use the water that you have for what you can. And then if it's not enough, then move on to tayammum. Yes? Does that make sense? So he does wudu with what he can, and then he moves on to tayammum. And that's generally because the Prophet says, وَإِذَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِأَمْرٍ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. If I command you something, then do as much as you can of it. Then he says, وَيَتَيَمَّمُ لِلْجُرْحِ عِنْدَ غَسْلِهِ إِن لَمْ يُمْكِنْ مَسْحُهُ بِالْمَاءِ وَيَغْسِلُ الصَّحِيحِ. Let's say my arm here is injured. My arm here is injured. I'm not able to wash it. Do we say straight away move on to tayammum? No. We say to him, if you can't wash it, wipe it. Meaning wet your hand and wipe it. That's the second step. Because they say wiping is as if it's the lowest grade of washing. So therefore we do that before we move on to tayammum. Let's say he said, I can't wipe it either. If I wipe it also, it's going to make my injury worse. Then we say to him, you make tayammum. And this is, how does he make tayammum in this case? He washes everything else which is perfectly fine. His right arm is fine, his face is fine, his feet are fine, everything's fine. He washes it all. And he makes tayammum for this part. When does he make tayammum? After the wudu? Or before the wudu? Or during the wudu? So there's a difference of opinion here. Huh? They say that he should make tayammum when he finishes. Now let's say it's my left arm that's injured. We have a condition in wudu which is tartib. Therefore, when I finish with my right arm, then I make tayammum for the left arm, then I move on. Because tartib is a condition in wudu. Does that make sense? If you do it after, it's as if you have done everything, washed your feet, then washed your arm. Does that make sense? That's why they said that he must do it when the time of that body part comes. Then he says, وَطَلَبُ الْمَاءِ فَرْضٌ فَإِنْ نَسِيَ قُدْرَتَهُ عَلَيْهِ وَتَيَمَّمَ أَعَادٍ. Now the person that the salah time has come in and he can't find water, it is fard upon him to look and seek water. Why is it fard? Because let's say time for salah came in. As soon as it came in, I said, I can't find water. Who is it that says I can't find? The one who searched. But the one who didn't search, this person can't say I didn't find. He must search. So if he forgot to search and he prayed, and then he remembered that he was able to look for water, he must repeat his salah. He must repeat his salah. Then he says, وَفُرُوضُهُ, the furud of tayammum. He says, مَسْحُ وَجْهِهِ وَيَدَيْهِ إِلَى كُوعَيْهِ وَفِي أَصْغَرَ تَرْتِيبٌ وَمُوَالَاتٌ. In general, the furud is for him, the sifa is that he hits his hand on the ground, and then he wipes his face, and then he wipes his hand. And that's tayammum done. That's it, one hit. People, they think that for each body part he needs to get soil and wash the full arm, and then go to feet, wash the full foot. Tayammum is just that. Wiping the face and the hand. Not even the arm, just the hand. That's it. And then he says, وَفِي أَصْغَرْ, because tayammum can be done on behalf of hadath akbar and hadath asghar. Let's say someone is upon janab, he didn't find water. Is he allowed to make tayammum for the hadath akbar? Yes. So he says, same thing. Yes, just like salah. Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ sent him, and then he fell into janab. Ammar, he didn't know the ruling, what he should do. So what did he do? He said, فَتَمَرَّغْتُ فِي الصَّعِيدِ كَمَا تَمَرَّغُ الدَّابَّةِ. He said, I started rolling my full body on the floor, just like the beast. Because he thinks that he needs to get soil to each part of the body. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا كَانَ يَكْفِيكَ أَن تَقُولَ بِيَدَيْكَ هَكَذَا. The Prophet ﷺ then taught him the tayammum. So then he says, in hadath asghar, if you're making tayammum on behalf of wudu, then we also say to you tartib is wajib and muwalat is wajib. But if I'm doing tayammum on behalf of hadath akbar, then I don't need to do my face first and my hand first, because it's not wajib in ghusl. In ghusl you don't have to start with your head, then your leg. Does it make sense? And then he says, وَمُوَالَات. Muwalat is a condition in wudu, not in ghusl. So therefore we make it condition in the tayammum that is done on behalf of hadath asghar, not on behalf of hadath akbar. So let's say someone was making ghusl, and he washed his body, and he left his head for the next morning. Is that fine? That's okay, because muwalat, which is consecutiveness, is not a condition in ghusl, but it's a condition in wudu. طيب, we'll stop there inshallah. Wallahu a'lam, wa sallallahu alaihi wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.